what America was and what it can become. This is Liberty Town Hall.
And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. We're joined today with Ken Thompson in studio. Welcome back, Ken.
Thank you, Glenn.
We're talking about capitalized human resources today, Ken. Would Hitler be proud of America today?
Given that he was head of the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany, I would think he would find some affinity with the way the trade unionist movement has succeeded in America today. The trade unionists monopolized the labor force with the outright support of federal and state legislation over the past 77 years. The legislation just went through Lansing as the first attempt in over 80 years to put a stop to capitalizing our labor.
So other than these right-to-work bills being passed in these states, Hitler would be proud of how the unions have accomplished
yes,
things,
they have.
Right?
And
I mean, I hate to use such a divisive person such as Hitler, but this is exactly what Hitler has tried to do with the twist. He wants to wipe Israel off the map.
Well,
so when you take the hate side of wiping Israel off the map, the governmental operating structure really is the progressive movement at its heart and core, correct?
Well, yes. Well, what people forget is everything Hitler did was legislated into law. Everything he did
everything was by law.
Even
they elected him,
right.
They turned over supreme power to him.
Gun control was elected by law. Supreme power was elected by law. Legislated by the Parliament of the Reichstag, which is their Congress in Germany.
But all
today.
these took away rights from the people and made it controlled by the government or the ruling authority at the time.
Correct.
Under the color of law.
Well, what you have here is they use statutes. They incorporated the Federal Reserve in 13. It went bankrupt in 33. The trade union was statutorized under federal law in 37 and under state law in 39, monopolized it.
So even the Federal Reserve is part of this monopolitive union scheme going on.
Yes, it is. These
are working hand in hand.
Well, you go to the bank.
Well, that's awful contemptuous of the Federal Reserve, isn't it?
Well, the Federal Reserve is a contemptuous organization. They print money out of thin air, provide false promises to everybody. It's a creature of the federal law. The federal Congress doesn't understand its own authorities anymore. We've seen that by this purge we've just recently Boehner imposed to put more progressives in authority as opposed to putting constitutional principled actors in authority.
Or the president trying to take the debt authority to raise the debt upon the White House versus Congress.
Yeah, he wants to.
So you see all these power grabs going on.
Well, we live at the epitome of ignorance.
But we spent hundreds of millions of dollars, millions of people's lives to stop regimes like this from happening all over the world. I mean, World War I and World War II was to stop these type of things so that we could keep our individual liberties.
It was to stop the version of
the Federal Reserve
side.
really has made us into capitalized human resources,
yes,
correct?
Yes, they have.
Really, we're almost slaves to the dollar debt now, right?
We are a capitalized human resource. We're enslaved by statutory law, through the taxation of our property rights, through the monopolization of unions, labor pools, through the suppression of our own backyards to taxation. We have fallen under an umbrella of deliberated dysfunctional literacy, well orchestrated, well choreographed. You go back to the days of Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Thomas Woodrow Wilson, who was who established the program we live under today. All the original acts that succeeded in the 30s failed under Thomas Woodrow Wilson. And they just kept creeping and creeping. The Fabian Society. So if they didn't make it this
time, they'll do it again and do it again until they get what they want. And nobody ever steps back to clean up this nightmare?
Right. And what they were doing is they were living off our history and lying about the future. And then they rewrote history with Thomas Woodrow Wilson in 1902 when he praised the Reconstruction Acts of the Radical Republicans, which was an absolute suppression of liberty by the federal Congress in the aftermath of the chaos of the war between the states.
But didn't they say that they had to do these because of a crisis situation? Wasn't it, you can't let a good crisis go to waste?
Correct.
And we'll talk about that when we return with more Liberty Town Hall. And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. We're discussing capitalized human resources. Ken, break down exactly all the different ways that Americans have been capitalized as just nothing but a human resource feeding the machine.
Well, let's start with trade unionism.
Okay.
When by state law, the state empowers a monopoly of the labor pool under the banner of an employees union,
Yes.
whether
Okay.
it be public or private. Now, you as the employee, when you go seek the employer's position, you are coerced by application of employment to subsidize, whether you like it or not, the union dues.
Yes, you have to pay union dues.
You have to pay union
Except
dues.
Michigan has changed right to work. 23 other states or 24 other states have also passed right to work.
Where you have a freedom now, which you didn't have. Now, this freedom kicks in on April 15th, or April of 2013. And what happens is the free market comes back into being, and you're no longer coerced to be a capitalized human resource for, in this instant case, funding the union treasury.
But we're still capitalized in so many other ways.
Another way we are capitalized is to fund the ongoing daily cost of federal and state government expenditures. And that's known as, one of the schemes is Social Security.
Okay.
And
how's that making me a capitalized human resource then?
For what they have done under the guise of Social Security, as originating in 35 and amended in 39, is you as the employee are imposed at the source of your payment a tax that is turned over by state law to the Commissioner of Internal Revenue that funds the general fund of the United States government, the federal Congress.
So it's not really my Social Security money going into my retirement account.
No.
They're just keeping track of how much I paid in for the heck of it then?
Yeah, it's an accounting scheme. And what they did is within the statutory laws, it's been amended for the past 70 odd years, is they have an actuarial table. So if you worked for 30 years and you earned X amount of dollars over 30 years and 7.5% of your earnings were paid in, they create a table of how much you're going to give you as an entitlement expense, which is a tax subsidy is what they're doing.
So I get an entitlement based on my past history, but they really they're not tied together no more.
Not correlated at all, because people don't understand now we're over this physical cliff we're talking about now, which is January 1st, which is just political theater. But the point being is that if government doesn't fund itself, specifically doesn't have a budget in place to spend money on October 1st, on October 2nd, your Social Security won't be coming in the mail. For it is not a pension, it is a tax subsidy, and it's taxed today to cover today's expenses. So my son who's working today, who loses over 30 to 40% of his weekly paycheck
in taxes of all nature, right?
In taxes at state and federal and local level, is
That's
paying.
a lot of tax, by the way. Yeah.
It is. He used to earn good money till he lost it to taxes, but that tax money is then turned around to pay pensioners.
So this is the enslavement we have.
Correct.
That we're working to pay everybody else's past bills.
Yeah, we are a capitalized human resource. Our resources, our labor, our productivity, are the wealth that you and I would generate. And the government steps in between our wealth, takes it from us, and basically redistributes to their favorite kind.
Well, one of the biggest redistributors, I would have to say, would be the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
So how does the Federal Reserve play into all this?
Well, the Federal Reserve, under the Bank Conservation Act of 1933, no longer had to worry about having any kind of accountability for the creation of money.
So, like the unions have a monopoly on the workforce, the Federal Reserve, a private company, has a monopoly on our monetary policy.
They do.
Right? I mean, our entire money supply system is put in the hands of a private company.
A private company where by congressional statute, the president appoints certain members of the Federal Reserve Board.
But they're not allowed to even talk about what goes on in that room afterwards. I mean, there's no peeking rules.
No, it's a private company. It's a quasi-government organization. It's a private company to certain extents, but it falls under governmental regulations. That was the deal that was
Every
cut.
business falls underneath government regulations.
As a general operating rule today, yes, which was not the fundamental tenements of this republic as the founding fathers provided to us through the Constitution.
So they just got government regulation before everybody else did.
Yeah,
but they're still a private company.
They're still a private company.
Okay, how are they dumping $40 billion a month in buying up bad U.S. bonds?
They're buying mortgage securities. What they're doing is they're bailing out the 5 major money centers who invested heavily into the mortgage securities.
AIG we just bailed out, and yet they're being sold now to foreigners.
American Insurance Guarantee was a funnel to fund 16 trillion Federal Reserve given special drawing rights, not special drawing rights, but Federal Reserve notes to fund up Deutsche Bank and other associated European member banks to keep Greece from going off the deep end, even though they rioted in the streets. Now that's no longer on the news. We're being deceived, grossly deceived by the leadership who tells us they swear to uphold the laws and Constitution of the United States.
This one little book, they swear to uphold this book.
And when
they forget to read it even.
They don't even understand it. They show by their actions. And when you pass a statute that compels me to perform for you, i.e. the government, that
now
makes me a slave, a human resource.
Right. That's why we're saying is capitalized human resource.
It's a capital because from our indentured servitude, they take our capital.
Well, we'll pick this right up when we come back with more Liberty Town Hall after these messages. And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. Ken and I are discussing the capitalization of human resources, how the Fed is moving money around on a global scale behind, literally, not even, can't even say behind somebody's back, because all you got to do is go look. They got it all published. The World Monetary Fund keeps everything posted on the website. The UN keeps everything posted. The World Bank keeps everything posted. Federal Reserve posts all these little things going on and what they're doing. But nobody's looking at the big picture, so I guess it's not really behind everybody's back. It's in front of everybody, but they can't see the trees in the forest, apparently. So what do we do to get people to understand that we're being robbed from on a massive scale?
It's very difficult when we've been taught to believe the big lie is the truth.
Propaganda Central.
It's Propaganda Central. Bonds. They like to use bonds.
Yeah, okay, let's take bonds.
Bonds are a great example. Bonds are spending tomorrow's revenue today.
Yes, sir.
Now, if it's a private bond, not my concern, because you're going into the private
market. Well, like public bonds, they'll say we want to build a new road, they'll raise a bond, they'll basically get a bank loan then with a guarantee of the taxpayers to pay that bank loan back.
Yeah, and we as the...
It's a taxpayer guaranteed bond.
So they're capitalizing our labor
yes.
for the benefit of the state bonding issue.
Okay.
And
that's okay for roads, I think.
To a limited extent, yes.
I mean, there's things that I think that we need government projects for.
But what people fail to see is bonds never die.
No, they just keep going.
They refund the bond. They refund the bond.
It's like you get a bond approved for a certain thing, like you want to build a new school or you want to build something and you need to raise $10 million. So they'll get a bond and people will vote on it. Yes, we can do this. And in 20 years, that bond will be paid off or whatever it is. But they just renew the capital back into that bond and the taxpayers are on the hook again.
Well, the best example we have is down in our home county of Ionia, where the school district in Belding got a 30-year bond for tens of millions of dollars. And they got a building program going on public school grounds, building beautiful structures that are going to be paid for by the children way after they graduate. And they don't understand the nature of what a public bond is. And at the international level with the Federal Reserve, not many people were around in the 60s when inflation went from 1% to 2%. That's doubling, by the way. It's 200%. And what they did in 1970 is the Federal Reserve created special drawing rights.
Yeah, here we go. Here we go.
Special drawing rights is an insidious monetary tool where the 183 member states of the United Nations, any of the member states were hurting in their governmental spending programs for the year. The Federal Reserve, through the World Bank or International Monetary Fund, would allow them to have a special drawing right.
Like a credit card.
It was a credit card, and the special drawing right was predicated upon the future production of their citizens.
So again, you're slaving them to the money that you're getting now.
You're slaving them to the Federal Reserve through its various octopuses, its octopi arms that fly all over this world now. And we are suffering. We have today the ability to communicate with people all over the world. When I publish things on the blog or publish things on the social media, Facebook, I get hits from all over the world. And it's very interesting because we're not alone in this quest.
It's amazing when we get actual people from halfway around the world writing me saying, hey, they've seen us on Liberty Town Hall.
Yes.
So literally, it's a global communication structure right now.
We've got a thing. My opinion is in 1898, when we took Cuba, we should have made it a state. We wouldn't have Fidel. They shouldn't have executed Walker when he took over Nicaragua in 1861. But we've had an insidious program of socialists operating in this country before the dates of the Civil War. Personally, I blame Napoleon III because the first thing he did when he took over in 1848 is he kicked out all the communists, and they all went to New York and Washington, D.C.
We got them all here, huh?
Yeah, and they lived large at our expense.
Well, but they've been very smart about how they've done this. I guess progressively chipping away at it is the most accurate way to say it.
Yeah.
They would grab this, they'd grab this, and they'd fight a battle. Okay, we lost, but then we'll fight it again. And then when they finally get it, we never roll back to where our liberty should be. We are enslaved to all this debt and paying for bills. Most of these people have already passed away and are dead now.
Yes.
Thomas Jefferson warned us on this in our opening show of this. It was the quote at the end of the show that said, you know, no generation should go in debt greater than they can pay.
Correct.
Otherwise, the next generation is paying the bills of that generation. Therefore, the current generation is living for the dead and not for themselves.
We need Andrew
and we're
Jackson.
really we're in this spot where we're paying the bills that were run up 50 years ago, and they're now coming to a head, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so now the federal government, or Federal Reserve rather, not the federal government,
yeah.
Federal Reserve said, we're going to go buy up a bunch of fake money from the government's debt, right? So that we can keep the game going.
Well, the insidious treachery of this whole financial scheme is it's not just one element. It's a combination of political interests.
All of them going on
and
at
they're
once.
all sitting at the table feeding on us. The Federal Reserve System was a Ponzi scheme in its inception.
Ponzi scheme, that's a good definition for it.
Social Security is a Ponzi scheme in its application, and Social Security was predicated upon Otto von Bismarck's scheme he implemented in 1889.
Well, let's take Social Security for example. Social Security was supposed to be put in as a reasonable social safety network for the seniors and elderly not to have their heat shut off and go without food.
Widows, orphans, pensioners, and the blind.
Right.
Right out of the first paragraph.
Right. So, but it was supposed to be protecting them against these things happening in later life when they were no longer of the age to care for themselves.
That was the propaganda, and that's exactly what it is, the propaganda of the progressives of FDR.
So they would collect it all their life and only pay for a little bit of time period, and they would be able to finish off with the rest of their life comfortably, kind of mentality.
Well, the
but now people are living so much longer, right?
Well, the system, when Otto von Bismarck put in the system in 1889 in Germany, he basically pragmatically said, if you live to 65, I'll give you a mark. Well, and that's why he picked 65, because the factory workers didn't live to 65.
Well, we'll talk about why they picked 65 when we return after these messages. And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. Ken and I are discussing capitalization of the human resources and how we have been basically enslaved to the debt that is being built up in all these different groups, right, Ken?
Yes.
What do we do? What do we do now? When you actually follow your dollar from the moment you work and earn it to the time it actually has gone out of your pocket, it has gotten at least 50, 60% of it gobbled up in taxes.
Yes. Because,
like, for example, when I go buy a loaf of bread, 22% of that loaf of bread is federal taxes. So even 22% of my dollar right there is going to taxes. Mm-hmm. So I get taxed coming to me, I have to pay taxes going out big time, and then you got your sales tax and all these other things on top of it. So really we end up with a very small portion of our dollar that's usable. And then they dilute the value of the dollar, like the federal government or the Federal Reserve buying up $40 billion worth of bonds every month. I mean, that dilutes our dollar $500 billion a year. This is ridiculous. So what do we do, Ken? We don't have a lot of time on today's show to summarize this, but seriously, what do we do?
The solution's in the state capitol. It's a state legislature. It's a state. It's a states' rights issue. What we have suffered for the past 100 years is the federal government, the federal legislature, Congress, allying itself with certain elements in the state legislatures where they pass what's called commingling legislation, such as Social Security, where the feds enact a model law and say, Glenn, do you want to enact a law that we agree to, and we'll tell everybody.
So what happens if a
state
says we don't want to participate in the Social Security program no more? We're going to pick up our our own. So any current liabilities on the Social Security has got to be paid from the Fed. But anyone new coming in, we're going to take care of it. We're going to do a health savings plan, and we're going to do a retirement savings accounts for people so that they can actually invest, have their money, and know what they got when they're retirement, and then pass it on to their inheritors if they should die before they get to that point.
Well, you go back to the models in the 1880s and 1890s and early first 20 years of the 20th century. Associations of trade unionists, or craftsmen, I should say. I don't want to use the word unionists at that time. Of craftsmen came together. They had a beneficial association where you did contribute, like you said.
So that'd be a reason to join that union per se, correct?
It was a free association of private participation. And that way you could hold people accountable.
So what happens if a state decides, you know what, we passed the law there, we're going to pass a law to undo that law, and we drop out of the Social Security system? What happens if Alabama or Texas drop out of the Social Security program? Can they drop out?
Yes, they can. You just terminate the laws. You repeal the laws. In our state, it's Public Act 1 in 1936 and Public Act 280 in 1939. Those are the two primary laws that implemented what we know as Social Security and all the other welfare entitlement programs that exist.
Do you think if one state actually stood up and said, we're going to pass a law, drop out of the Social Security, that it would bring it enough of ahead that people would actually fix the Social Security problem?
If you could get through the fog of the vicious propaganda that'll come out, yes, it would. For once, we are the wealth generators. You and I and every other citizen in America, especially the 10 million souls here in Michigan, we are the wealth generators. We do not need government. Government has an international position at the federal level is to keep the enemies off our shores. At the state level, it's to ensure domestic tranquility.
And on the local level?
On the local level, the sheriff shoots the bad guys.
Well, that's what we got time for today, is leave it with the sheriff shoots the bad guys and we have our liberty. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time here on Liberty Town Hall.
All the property that is necessary to a man for the conservation of the individual and the propagation of the species is his natural right, which none can justly deprive him of. But all property superfluous to such purposes is the property of the public, who by their laws have created it, and who may therefore by other laws dispose of it. Whenever the welfare of the public shall demand such disposition, he that does not like civil society on these terms, let him retire and live among the savages. He can have no right to the benefits of society who will not pay his club toward the support of it. Benjamin Franklin, letter to Robert Morris, December 25th, 1783.